Welcome back to Views with Hughes, Agenda Free News. This is Jerome Hughes. Now, let's go ahead and get right into it. So, one question many former and remaining Star Wars fans for a while are wondering now, how did Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy kill Star Wars? Okay, now Kathleen Kennedy and her outright refusal to listen to the very people who have supported Star Wars franchise for decades, which is us, you and me, and the fans, is a huge issue. You know, there was the time when the customer was always right, but especially in the entertainment industry. And when fans spoke up about what they love or didn't love, creators listened. But under Kathleen Kennedy and her leadership, well, let's just say it seems that basic idea has been thrown out the window. Okay, now Kathleen Kennedy has her own agenda, as you all know, and is not aligned with what fans actually want. Now, if you enjoy all the content I share, go ahead, smash the like button, share, follow across social media, and subscribe to the channel. Now, I've been thinking a lot about this, and the more I reflect on it, the clearer it becomes. You know, Kathleen Kennedy's stubbornness and refusal to pivot, even after the disaster that's been recent Star Wars content, is one of the biggest problems facing Lucasfilm right now and Disney. Now, Kathleen Kennedy seems to be determined to go ahead and just drive the Star Wars franchise in a direction that no one asked for. And it all comes down to one simple fact. Kathleen Kennedy is simply not listening to the fans. She don't care what the fans say. And not only that, but Kathleen Kennedy seems to think she knows better than us. Okay, the very people who made Star Wars what it is today, all because she went ahead and fetched some coffees in the days of George Lucas. But let's break this down further, folks. Historically, Star Wars has been a franchise beloved by millions around the world. And that's something that Kathleen Kennedy should be protecting. Okay, now we've grown up with these stories and stuff, these characters and all these incredible worlds that George Lucas created. And all right, so whether you're from Generation X or you're like me and a millennial or even an older boomer, Star Wars had this timeless appeal that brought people together. And here's the thing, people knew what they wanted from Star Wars. Okay, thing is, Kathleen Kennedy doesn't care about that. And then the people want the epic space opera, the good story of good versus evil, the classic hero's journey. And that's why the original trilogy and in some aspects the prequels were so successful. But under Kathleen Kennedy, everything has changed. And we've seen that with everything with the Disney sequels under Kathleen Kennedy. But what Kathleen Kennedy has done with the beloved franchise, well, Kathleen Kennedy has taken it in a completely different direction, okay, filled with political agendas and also ignored the cries of the loyal fan base. Now, this decline didn't happen overnight. You see, this has been a slow, painful process, starting with The Last Jedi and continuing with each new Star Wars project that Kathleen Kennedy and her regime has put out. And you know what? Kathleen Kennedy seems dead set on pushing woke Star Wars away from what fans love, and it's getting worse by the minute. Okay, but this shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. But I'm not saying every single thing Kathleen Kennedy has touched has been a total failure, because there's been some that brought some bright spots, like Rogue One, for example, pretty solid. And the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, where she didn't really have much to do with, only a name only, it was generally well received. But overall, the direction that Star Wars has taken under Kathleen Kennedy's leadership is one that alienates the very people who made the franchise successful in the first place. And it seems like Kathleen Kennedy is definitely, well, no, not seems, she's definitely doubling down on this approach. And no matter how much the fans push back, Kathleen Kennedy is going to keep Kathleen Kennedy the whole mess. Now, then there's also the fan reaction. You've got lifelong Star Wars fans, people who've supported this franchise for 30 or 40 years, openly criticizing the new movies and the shows like The Acolyte, which was recently canceled, approved by Kathleen Kennedy. You also have YouTube channels, blogs, social media accounts, all filled with fans voicing their displeasure over what Kathleen Kennedy is doing with the franchise. And they're not just being whiny, they're pointing out the real issues with poor writing, inconsistent characters, plot holes, and most importantly, the overbearing political messaging that Kathleen Kennedy has shoehorned into a galaxy far, far away. And this is like, there's nothing really new to expect from or different expect from Kathleen Kennedy. And what Kathleen Kennedy and her response to all of this, silence, or worse, like basically condemning the thoughts of other people. And Kathleen Kennedy doesn't engage with, the fans, and Kathleen Kennedy doesn't acknowledge the criticism. And it's like Kathleen Kennedy is living in her own bubble, completely cut off from the reality of what's happening to Star Wars under her leadership. Excuse me. What's the result? We're seeing a box office failures, declining merchandise sales, and even plummeting viewership on Disney Plus and everything. And it's been a consistent downward trend since The Force Awakens. Okay. And you think by now that Kathleen Kennedy would just go ahead and realize something's not working. But like I said, Kathleen Kennedy is going to keep Kathleen Kennedy. But instead of adjusting the course and giving the fans what they actually want, more of that classic Star Wars storytelling, with a focus on adventure, heart, and character development, Kathleen Kennedy is doubling down on identity politics and woke messaging. All right. And look, I'm not saying that there's no room for diversity in Star Wars at all. But when Kathleen Kennedy and her focus shifts away from telling a good story and becomes more about ticking off boxes, as well as basically, shoving a political agenda down people's throats, that's when you lose all the good fans, the core fans that actually made Star Wars what it is. A perfect example of this is an Acolyte. We all saw that the show that was canceled that no one was excited about except for Kathleen Kennedy and a small group of activists on Twitter. Now, the Star Wars fan base, on the other hand, by large, had no interest in it. But is Kathleen Kennedy listening? Of course not. I mean, she made sense of canceling, but Kathleen Kennedy is basically pushing forward with the woke agenda as if it's the greatest thing that ever happened to Star Wars. And we all know how this is going to end. Another underwhelming show that alienates the fans and, contributes to the slow death of this once great franchise. Okay. Now, we may or may not see that with Skeleton and Crew. I don't know, but it's no secret that Kathleen Kennedy has been on a mission to try and reshape Star Wars to something that's fits Kathleen Kennedy and her political ideology rather than something that resonates with the fans. So in other words, it's all about Kathleen Kennedy. And the results speaks for themselves. The sequel trilogy approved by Kathleen Kennedy was a mess, especially with The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. Fans were outraged at Kathleen Kennedy over how beloved characters like Luke Skywalker were treated, not to mention the incoherent plot lines and the lack of any real direction. And then don't even get me started on Solo, which, like a Star Wars story, which was an outright disaster at the box office. And it's clear that fans don't want this version of Star Wars, yet Kathleen Kennedy keeps on giving it to us as if she knows what's best for us. Now, some people might argue, well, Kathleen Kennedy is just trying to modernize Star Wars and make it more appealing to younger audiences. But here's the problem with that. That argument right there, these younger audiences aren't showing up. The very people that Kathleen Kennedy seems to be, trying to target with these, political identity politics driven narratives aren't even tuning in. Now, you see the box office numbers, the merchandise sales, the viewership numbers for Disney Plus Star Wars shows, none of it supports the idea that this new direction is working. Okay. And meanwhile, the core fan base, the people who have been there from the beginning, are being driven away. Or in other words, they're just simply running faster away from this problem. Now, think about it. Why would you alienate the very group of people who have supported this franchise for decades? Now, it makes no sense. Okay, it makes no business sense at all, and it makes no creative sense either. And it certainly doesn't make sense from a cultural standpoint. Okay, yet Kathleen Kennedy keeps on charging forward with this mess. And she's oblivious to the fact that Kathleen Kennedy is running Star Wars brand to the ground. And that's basically Kathleen Kennedy in a nutshell. And here's the thing. Star Wars doesn't even need to be modernized or even overhauled with a bunch of woke messaging to be successful. That's just basically their way of saying that they want it to be woke and everything. So that way they can go ahead and sell the whole DEI initiative so they can go ahead and make more money. But the problem is the formula already exists and that DEI message isn't even working. Prime example, look at Mandalorian. When it first came out, fans loved it. Why? Because it felt like classic Star Wars. It had a sense of adventure, wonder, and most importantly, it respected the legacy of the franchise itself. It wasn't trying to preach to the audience or push some sort of political agenda. It was just good, entertaining Star Wars, something that Kathleen Kennedy seems to have forgotten. And I can hear right now, I can see it in the comment section right now. All the people out there who are activists criticizing me, calling me Istophobic and stuff for saying this stuff. But instead of building on that success, Kathleen Kennedy seems intent on steering the ship back into the iceberg. We saw this with the Book of Boba Fett, which failed to capture the same magic as the Mandalorian. And you know what? Now We're seeing it with shows like the Acolyte. We also saw it with the Ahsoka, and no one was like excited about the Acolyte, and some people were excited and became disappointed with Kathleen Kennedy over how Ahsoka was handled. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to one thing: Kathleen Kennedy and her refusal to listen to the fans. Okay, the customer in this case, the fans, are always right, and that's something that Kathleen Kennedy doesn't want to believe. Now, we know what we want for Star Wars. It's not more divisive political message. It's actually not poorly written characters and inconsistent storylines. We want the heart and soul of Star Wars. You know, basically, we want those stories back where that brought us all together in the first place. Kathleen Kennedy needs to understand this, but it seems to me that she knows it, but she just doesn't care. But as long as Kathleen Kennedy is in charge, it seems like that's not going to happen. And you know what? Kathleen Kennedy is determined to push her vision of Star Wars and stuff, regardless of how many fans she alienates in the process. And the result, a once great franchise is now a shadow of its former self with no clear path forward, except for a woman blaming white straight males and stuff as a problem that is not successful. So where does that leave us fans? Well, we got to keep going ahead and either speak up or just ignore Kathleen Kennedy's brand of Star Wars as much as possible. We also got to keep pushing back against the direction that Kathleen Kennedy is taking Star Wars. And because of at the end of the day, this franchise belongs to the fans. And guess what? There's only a few remaining fans left over thanks to Kathleen Kennedy. Now, Kathleen Kennedy need to go ahead and wise up and shape up, because of the fact of the matter is it's only a few number of fans that still remains, okay? Now, it's the fans who made Star Wars a global phenomenon in the first place that it is, well, was, and it's the fans who will determine its future. Now, we just need Lucasfilm and, more importantly, Kathleen Kennedy to remember that, okay? So, let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Also, be sure to include any additional thoughts you may have this particular topic. If you enjoyed what I shared in this video, go ahead, smash the like button, share far wide across social media. And if you haven't done so already, and you enjoyed all the content that I put there, go ahead, subscribe to the channel. Click the bell notifications so that way you're notified of future uploads and updates. Till then, peace.